Welcome back, everybody, to Edge of the Rabbit Hole. I'm author and ghost historian Mike Ricksecker. With me, as always, my co-hostess Vanessa Hogle, and down in the chat room, our chat Shananigator Shana, shaking everything up. We have a very special episode up for you tonight. Carl Johnson is back with us. He's on full video this time, which is awesome. But we're going to be talking about shadow people and referring a lot to A Walk in the Shadows. The book just came out today. Carl had a lot of input on this book, and I do want to thank all of you that have already purchased this. It is risen to, on Amazon, #1 new release in ghosts and hauntings and in the supernaturalism category. So thank you guys very much for that. And Carl, welcome back to the show.
Hello there, and it is so good to be back. Good to see you, Mike and Vanessa.
And to see you.
You can see me this time.
Can see
right. Yeah, the last couple times it was just a photo, but now we got you, so it's great.
Now I'll try not to disappoint. I thought you had my photo with the lips moving or something like a mouth.
Yeah, with just the lips, right?
No, that would have been fun though.
But I think everybody in the chat room wants to know what you're snacking on tonight.
Well, I don't know if you can show labels. I have peanut butter.
We can.
Okay, I have Reese's peanut butter cups, and I have Pringles. That's the one that's going to make the noise.
Okay.
I'm a little jealous.
I'm sharing them with my lovely co-host here.
Show Elise.
Yeah, come on, Elise.
Come on over here, sweetheart. This is Elise Jamarco Carlson. Come on, dear.
I'm not going to stay here.
Hi, Elise. How you doing?
Hi, Mike.
You can stay here. She has some input in your book, some contributions there.
Yeah.
She makes things work. She greases the gears. Elise works behind the scenes a lot. So sometimes when things meld, it's because Elise was part of the project, and you don't right away know that.
Yeah, she was definitely part of the project.
Credit for what she does.
So, and everybody down in the chat room is saying hi, Elise. So very cool.
They're all saying hi, Elise.
Well, I can still see her in the window behind there.
Oh, in the reflection, yeah.
Yeah, so You're still on there, love.
So, Carl, let's get into it. I approached you about A Walk in the Shadows when I was in the process of writing it, because a couple of years ago when I was there at Ocean State Paracon, and I was talking about shadow people, you hit me up you're all the way in the back of the auditorium, and you asked me a very interesting question about if shadow people had voices. And afterward, we ended up having a little bit of a conversation about that. Of course, we've known each other for years, but we stayed in a lot more contact after that. And I picked your brain a lot for this book. We had we had a couple of different conversations, and you're actually featured in A Walk in the Shadows quite a bit, and you have a little bit of a different take on shadow people, and have had many experiences. Of course, we talked about that at length at the farmhouse there in Harrisville this past fall. But what's your input here on what shadow people may be?
It's quite an enigma, even in the preternatural. We probably will never fully understand what shadow people are, where they're from, but we have theories. They're interdimensional, I'm pretty sure. They exist in another plane of existence, and they can pop in and out of ours. I don't know if they do it at will, but sometimes they're with us, sometimes they're visible. What we do suspect about shadow people is that they are recalcitrant. They don't like to be noticed. They are evasive, elusive, and when we see them, it's usually not intentional. Or sometimes they do like to scare us, and they can scare the bejesus out of us. They're a type of ghost or spirit, but they have an opacity to them. They can block out light behind them, and that reveals them. And they seem to show up more in photographs than we do like eyewitnesses. But I have seen them. You have seen them. Mm-hmm. And they show up at the most inconvenient times. You just don't expect them to be there. And the reason they're so frightening is because they're very dark. Well, they're actually, as I've termed it, the absence of light, like a black hole in it.
Right.
Sometimes in a human shape. They are not always in a human shape, but often they are. So that has some kind of relation to the human species. Whether they take on that form or just have it, or if they take it on willfully, we don't know. So there's a lot we don't know about shadow people, but they're interesting. It's fun to talk about them. Or it's
I have a question. I was helping somebody the other day, and they were seeing what the lay person, or if you don't have a lot of experience with it, would assume was a shadow person in their home, but we knew that it wasn't negative. How can people differentiate between what is technically a shadow person and what is a spirit trying to manifest, and that is the level of manifestation that we're able to see at that time, because there is a very real difference.
Basically wait it out, see what it does, what kind of form it takes. If it takes a form, shadow people, as I said, they're not always in that anthropomorphic form.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they're just formless. They're blackness that issues out, and they seem to favor egresses and corridors. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they don't normally go through walls like a ghost would. And if you observe it, if you're fortunate to be able to observe this being long enough, you'll recognize it as a shadow ghost, because it just does, it's featureless. It's just that outline. Except, as we'll get into, and as Mike does in his book, sometimes they have red eyes. That's been reported. You know,
Yeah, and that was the
characteristic.
case in which we first met, was the entity with red eyes there at the house in Edmond, Oklahoma. And although I never saw that particular entity, I did see other shadow entities at that house. It was that particular one that was terrorizing Taliesin, the cat, other members of the family, and you ended up coming out onto that investigation and doing the cleansing for that episode on The Haunted.
Yes, I was apprehensive about that because I had been warned. They didn't know how Taliesin would react when she saw me, because she knew I was coming, and she had a trepidation about me coming there. So I was the chastiser,
Right.
So, which right away started me thinking there's a demonic element here, and well, was it a demon in the true sense, or was it a shadow ghost? There must be some difference. And one thing that manifested was strange shadow-like beings in the trees, seemed to be climbing the trees. That was the second time I experienced something akin to that. And it looked like squirrels or monkeys, you know, a combination of squirrels. They had arms that I could see some kind of figures climbing up in the trees, but they weren't moving the branches. And remember that terrific wind that picked up?
Yeah, that wind was crazy. And what was interesting about that wind is the family was sitting in the side yard and they didn't feel the wind at all. It was just confined there to the backyard.
And right at that time, we were endeavoring to bring this invasive entity out of the house and cast it out. Mm-hmm. So maybe that had something to do with the atmospheric conditions, because, it was cyclonic. And remember, the cat was running in a circle around us.
Yeah, around and around, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of strange things. You get a little glimpse of that in the television episode that documented that investigation. But
yeah, they caught a few clips of that.
Yeah, stranger things went on that weren't, in the final edit.
Yeah, there's a lot that they weren't able to include in that particular episode. And we've talked about it before, how they really needed 2 hours for that particular episode. Yes. There's so much that happened, but that was one that you did end up deeming demonic. And that's a question as I cover shadow people and people contact me, that people have a lot of questions about how do you know when a particular shadow person is an actual demonic entity, because there are others that seem that like they may be a human spirit. So how are you able to tell these different things apart?
This had elements of both. I think it's very difficult to tell that apart, because shadow person should be in its own category. But this was, it seemed to have it out for that family, and it was very attached to the family, but wanted to cause them great distress, which it did. But it manifested as a shadow person.
Right.
Remember, Taliesin's brother would see a shadowy form across the wall and in his room. So, what's the difference? Really don't know. It's speculation, a lot of it. I don't think every shadow person is demonic. I think they have their own way, and maybe when they come through from whatever reality in which they exist, they bring something else with them. Maybe a horde of them come through. Maybe some more malevolent entities come with the shadow ghost. and they create a little community there. But,
We caught a fairly significant one on film at a place called Moor Hall in Ireland. A very formidable figure of a man, and he was within 3 feet of me, and I could not see him myself. We could all feel him, but he showed up perfectly on the side of my camera: head, neck, shoulders, arm, down his body. And you're absolutely right. He completely blocked out any light. There's no way a hair off my head made this image. No way. And it was solid black, almost as if it was drawn there, which we did not do. I don't believe that was demonic, but I believe you hit the nail on the head when you said when they come back, they can bring that negativity with them, because that place was very, very negative when you could feel him. And he was an actual, real, living, breathing person in history. Obviously not a demon. So I think you hit the nail on the head with that.
maybe people who had great psychic impact on their environment, affected other human beings, imposed their reality during life. Maybe they bring some of that with them into another world, and they want to come back. They don't want to leave our realm. Were all shadow people once human? Don't know. I think it touches on certain facets of different realities. Quantum physics, for instance, you start wondering about that. In quantum physics, of course, the laws of time and space, which are normally interrelated, they can become distorted. And shadow people use that. In fact, shadow people, I don't know if they do it deliberately, but shadow people are seen to move rapidly. They don't move at the same rate we do, as human beings. They seem to. In fact, I heard a case of one shadow ghost who actually walked backwards. One shadow person.
Well, that's interesting.
So they're different from us, but they're aware of us.
I think that would actually frighten me, and I'm not frightened of anything. But if they were walking backwards, and I could tell they were walking backwards,
there's something very eerie about that. Yes.
Yeah, I'm not certain I would be okay with that.
No, that disturbed me when I heard about it. Somebody told me they had that in their home.
Yeah,
it does seem that time works differently for them, especially with how fast they can move. And so it almost seems like, we're catching a glimpse of them on their plane of existence, and on that plane of existence, perhaps time is working differently. And your brother Keith, one of his contributions to the book, because he's in there as well, talks about time displacement. So that may factor into it as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, their time is a little different. They're a little out of sync with us, sometimes a lot out of sync. The shadow person I've become most familiar with is the one at Slater Mill campus in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that this one seems confined to one building. I don't see him other places. This is in the Stone Wilkinson Mill, which was constructed in 1810, completed in 1811. And it was built to provide a machine shop and service station, like an annex station for Slater's Mill. And that's where the shadow ghost is. Why he's there, how he originated, was he once human? We don't know these things. Well, I know he's there because when I first started there in 2006, guests were reporting they were nervous because they saw a shadowy man walking inside the machine shop exhibit. So our staff went inside and there was nobody within. But I've been favored, I think, to see that shadow person for myself and photograph it. It's come out in 2 photographs that I know of. One of them I took. And well, I saw him in October of last year, of 2018, actually, so the year before last now. And there was an opening in the door, a crack in the door where you can see light through, the street lights coming through. And that was being blocked out. Something was interfacing with that, moving back and forth. Not at a regular rate, it would just, sometimes it would be blocked out. As I said, they contain one of the characteristics is they have an opacity to them. They can block out light behind them, and that's what this thing was doing. And I think it was trying not to be seen that night. Interestingly, I've started doing something to try and coax the shadow ghost to come out, to be friendly with it. Probably something I shouldn't be doing, making friends with a knowable entity. But you see, in this Wilkinson Mill, there is the original water wheel pit and the giant water wheel,
Right.
16,000-pound water wheel within that still functions. And what I would do is take smooth black stones and toss them in to the water wheel pit as an offering. It's like paying the ferryman over the river Styx, the newly
Right.
departed souls, they can enter the afterworld. And so I thought, well, let's give him a little token to show, we just come in here and hope he's going to do something, and usually he does not. Sometimes he does in dramatic fashion. Spikes have been known to fly around the room upstairs in the machine shop, and antique crutches have flown across the room. That doesn't happen very often. It's happened a couple of times. So I thought when we have guests down there for a public ghost hunt, I give everybody a smooth black stone or a privately booked paranormal investigation. Everybody takes a smooth black stone and tosses it into the water wheel pit. Kaplunk it, kaplunk it. I said, I don't think he grants wishes, but you can, think positive thoughts. Just toss one in. It's a little token of respect for our ghostly host.
Right.
And ever since I've been doing that and had people do that, he seems more responsive. We've been getting notable paranormal activity in the water wheel pit and the Wilkinson Mill. And I think it has something to do with us showing him respect.
Interesting.
What spirits do not typically respond to, especially not shadow ghosts, is if you demand or insult them, trying to coax them to come out. They'll just lie low. But try to be on friendly terms with them. Don't really get into conversations, but it's a little offering, and it seems to work.
Yeah, and you do talk about the shadow entity at Slayer's Milk quite a bit in A Walk in the Shadows. We talked about that when we had you on the phone this past summer, and I did a little interview with you and all that. So, and you guys can find the link to the book down in the description here on the YouTube channel. I have a couple comments and questions from the chat that I do want to get to real quick. So Judy Wilson, this was back when we were talking about the Edmund house. She was wondering if you were able to get rid of that entity, and you were able to push that out the back, and you worked really hard at that. And with that, I remember you were completely exhausted, that you ended up down on a knee and were having to catch your breath. So what does something like that take out of you to push this type of entity out of a particular location?
I don't know why it was so exhaustive to me. I felt very depleted afterwards. Those times where when I sank into the chair, I didn't know the camera was running. I might have tried to compose myself more if I had known, but it's just, ever since we were outside, it's just like, boom. I said, I don't know what's happened. I just did totally exhausted. I haven't had that much physical activity yet. I was tired, drained. It felt like I had donated blood and then went back and donated another pint of blood. Oh, forgot I already went. So it was, I just needed some sustenance. I needed water and just needed to rest for a while. I mean, it wasn't a terribly unpleasant feeling. I just felt tired. I needed to sit.
Right.
I don't understand the process in that, why it took so much out of me. I was praying in earnest, and I was endeavoring to cast the spirit out, as we all were. Seems to have taken something out of me. There's something it draws on. I think one has to contribute their own vital energy, their life force, a portion of it, to be effective in such an act.
You're absolutely correct.
Yeah, one of the aspects I touch on in A Walk in the Shadows is the idea, especially with the Hat Man. We had some questions in there about the Hat Man from Robert Hanna. The idea that some of these may be energy vampires, and they're there striking fear into you and then feeding off that fear. Do you think that may have been the case a bit with this red-eyed entity at that particular house?
Indeed, I do. Yes. Emotion is energy, and if somebody's in a rage or a lot of emotional output, they're going to feel exhausted afterwards, even if they're containing it. High emotion does, and stress does drain one's energies. It's just how we function. And I think this energy vampire, if you will, would draw on the emotions and incite it through fear, through anxiety. Those are favorite emotions for a demonic entity, for one thing: fear and anxiety. People aren't sure of themselves. It makes them vulnerable.
Right.
why the red eyes, I don't know. I know of a woman in Indiana. She had lost her first child, and she and her husband were grieving. And she grew up in a very haunted environment. And it was actually documented for an episode of Paranormal Witness. Well, in one of the photographs, you can see, not in the next photograph, but in one of the photographs, you can see these two red dots floating above her. It's her husband and a pastor. And in the background, you can see, in what was her room, you can see these red eyes looking out. They really do look like red eyes. I don't know how they got there, what they would be. Um, that's rather disturbing about it.
Um,
Entity that has, these red orbs for eyes. But yeah, then certainly that's upsetting. That's would cause someone some distress to see that.
Oh, absolutely.
But I think they do draw on us, and anybody who's been in that environment around a demonic entity reports feeling like, I just felt so wiped out afterwards. I just felt fine, I felt ill. But you're not at your strongest when you're confronting one of these beings.
True.
You need to be, but in the aftermath, you really feel like something's been drawn out of you.
Right.
And the term energy vampire. It's also called Lamia nivitas, which is, energy vampire.
Mm-hmm. So, Vanessa, you had a question?
Oh, no, I was wondering, because that is the one thing that seems to be a continuous thing. You always hear about the red eyes. And it just makes me wonder, are red eyes actually what we're seeing, or is that something in our perception? Like, I can look at my dog every now and then, and she's got red eyes. My dog does not have red eyes. I just wonder if it's more of an optical illusion as to the color and what our brain immediately goes to.
You mean how our brain interprets it?
Exactly. Than it being what it actually is.
It actually being that frequency that would generate red light.
Exactly. Because there's plenty of colorblind people out there that see spirits, but you never hear. And if you're colorblind, the color red is green. Yes. For the most part, but you never hear anyone say they had green glowing eyes.
No. I've heard purple, yellow, and blue.
Yeah, and blue, but it's weird. Our brains automatically associate positive or negative energy with particular colors. They automatically do that. We've just been raised that way. We've been honed that way. And it just makes me wonder, if we immediately believe it's negative, does our brain immediately believe they're red?
It's the red light, the danger sign.
Exactly. Red means stop, They
come out red in photographs. And the photographs.
No different than a dog's eyes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, how would it do that to a dog? And and they do seem to affect animals, to be sure. When I've been involved in a lot of cases, the dogs and cats are sensitive to these frequencies, these entities.
And just putting a scientific spin on it, you know.
They don't analyze it or intellectualize it. They just know it's a menacing presence. And people sense that, but we try to block it out. Like, no, there's nothing in here. Why should I be upset? Why should I fight? So it reveals itself more.
True. Very true.
So we've had some other interesting questions in here, and a couple of these are actually related, and they're good questions here. From Alina, and I'll ask these two together. From Alina, apart from sleep paralysis, do you think some of us see shadow people during out-of-body experiences? And from Denise Pridemore, is it possible that shadow figures could be how a person looks that is actually a person roaming during an OBE? So what do you think, shadow people in out-of-body experiences?
When people are free from their bodies, they are more perceptive to the spirit world. I mean, I don't think we totally leave our bodies, but part of our consciousness or even our subconscious is projected. And in essence, we leave our bodies behind for a time. We stretch that cord, connects us to our bodies. And people who have astral traveled report seeing, sometimes they see deceased people, sometimes they see something pretty negative and ominous. And it's usually described as being something very black, very dark. So I think these shadow ghosts exist in a dimension that is very close to ours and parallel to ours. And that's when you can see them. When you're in a deep state of meditation and you feel like you can float, feel free of your physical confines, then sometimes people see something that they had not expected. And sometimes it's not something very friendly. They see these shadow entities. Myself, I wish I could do that. I wish I could expand my boundaries and just go into the spirit world and just look around, see what's there. Okay, there's something black and negative. There's something light. We interpret it as dark and light anyway.
Yeah, it's like we just usually catch a glimpse and that's it. It would be interesting to just have that proverbial veil pulled down for just a moment to be able to see everything that's actually around us. I think we'd be pretty shocked.
Yes, it's at a different frequency. It's a different spectrum beyond what our eyes can normally perceive, but it's there. It's around us. Every once in a while, it crosses over. I think of the dimensional realities as plates, and they are in motion. And sometimes they bisect, and that's when it gets into string theory too, which I don't know much about, but I can certainly talk about. You don't need to know a lot about it to talk about string theory. And I think sometimes these dimensional planes will intersect or bisect, and then we start getting crossovers where we see the ghosts or see the shadow beings. So I wish we could harness that, find a way to just, if not be on friendly terms with the shadow ghosts, the shadow people, just observe them more, because it seems to be by chance. Shadow beings, they're very difficult to coax to come out, if that's possible at all. I tried that little experiment with the shadow person, the stone Wilkinson mill. I say stone because it's composed of 3-foot thick rubble stone walls built like a fortress, 5 stories tall. It's an impressive structure. It's still there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's home to our shadow ghost. And just that little gesture of tossing stones into the water wheel pit. And I say, this is, out of respect for you. Thank you for permitting us to come into your place of work, toss the stones in, and just get more activity. Somehow strikes a sympathetic chord. So is that coaxing the shadow ghost, the shadow person? Maybe. If it works, I'm going to stick with it.
Something you said made me think of a movie that I saw years ago called The Watchers. And it had Christina Ricci in it. Didn't make a lot of money, but I still say it was a great movie. And it makes me wonder, are these shadow people, for the most part, watchers? Are they those who are, brought into our realm to watch us, not to necessarily interact, not to prevent, but to document and report back?
That makes them sound rather angelic or like celestial beings. Perhaps they're close enough to our plane where they have more readily access to our reality. Mm-hmm. They can go back and forth. They do seem to have an intelligence about them. And I've never perceived them as meaning us anything good, but they don't seem harmful either, except that they're rather frightening, disturbing.
Which is our perception of them.
Yes. Yeah. If only they would stay still long enough where we could really observe them.
Yeah, I'd like to actually just sit down and have a conversation with one. Say, hey, let's sit down and have a cup of coffee. So what exactly are you? Yeah. And that's one of the things that I usually say is that, these entities are so mysterious that I think until we actually have that conversation with one, say, hey, what exactly are you? We're still going to be kind of grasping at straws here, trying to figure it out.
That's the beauty of it.
Well, yeah. So we do have a few more questions here, actually a lot. Sure. But from Leslie Fear, can spirits or ghosts present themselves as shadow people, maybe to scare or intimidate the living?
Demonic entity can. They sometimes like to look rather gruesome. They also like to appear attractive, if it's just that purpose. Whether a ghost can do that, I don't know. Some ghosts can distort their features. There's really frightening stories of that. There's the red-headed hitchhiker along Route 6. It travels from Rhode Island into parts of Seekonk, Massachusetts.
I've heard of that one, yeah.
Yeah, and he's along this stretch of road, and he's been reported a number of times. I've talked to 2 people who saw the red-headed hitchhiker, and he does all kinds of creepy things. That really does scare me, at least reading these stories. Somebody saw him sitting at the side of the road when somebody's car had broken down, asked if he had a phone with him, and this shadow ghost just looked up, and then his features became all white and distorted, seemed to melt. So they seem to be able to do that. Some of them do. But relating this to shadow ghost, I don't know if they can. I don't think a human spirit would have the capacity to turn itself into a shadow ghost unless they were once human.
What
Well,
about the idea that
you're
a human spirit trying to manifest as an apparition and doesn't quite make it? It only appears as a shadow. There's a lot of ideas that
yeah,
that may be the case with some of these.
could be. I've seen a spirit in transition where it seems to be trying to manifest. I even have a photograph of that. In fact, in that same structure, the Wilkinson Mill, uh, a series of pictures were taken during one paranormal investigation. This goes way back to November 2009. And Jim Perry was the one conducting the paranormal. It was his first paranormal investigation. Most of Jim's over 100 digital pictures came out totally normal. In 3 of them, there is a distortion, which we just can't explain. It's white, though, and it has a dark background. Is that what the shadow ghost looks like in total darkness or near total darkness? Is that our shadow ghost we photograph? A shadow person in Wilkinson Mill? Maybe sometimes, because I have seen a whitish cylindrical form hovering over the water wheel.
Okay.
And then it didn't fade away, it just vanished. So it wasn't gas, vapor, just was gone. So maybe that's another aspect of the shadow person. And it looked like something in the photographs, and in what I saw and another witness saw, it looks like something trying to form, trying to manifest, but then blotted out.
And Keith has entered the chat room. So good evening, Keith. Happy to have you down there. So,
what is he saying? Is he saying anything?
Yes, I don't think I've seen him say anything yet. He said hi all, so okay, he's saying hello.
Maybe he has more answers than he has questions.
Maybe. But he had some input into A Walk in the Shadows as well, and there was a story there with he and Sandra, and so Keith is also a part of this as well. So, and I appreciate all of his input. There's an interesting question here from Basis 1945. There's a lot of people who report. We were just talking about, Vanessa was just talking about the Watchers, and a lot of people do report just seeing a shadow person in their room and it's just standing there staring at them. So she asks, if they are Watchers, who would they be reporting back to?
There's the $1 million question.
Yes, do they report back to God? Or some other interpretation of God? Perhaps they're their own world and they don't have to answer to anybody else. They may have echelons and subordinates and commanders, but they may have some direction. Very interesting manifestation. That's why we need more answers from them.
Right.
We can theorize about them. But just from observing them, there are things we can tell. They are in another dimensional plane. The time is different for them. Hence the rapid movement. Why do they sometimes seem to be wearing clothing? Their outlines show them wearing hats, top hat, sometimes a cowboy style hat or wide brimmed fedora. Now that suggests a human presence. So,
or at least a human influence. Maybe they're trying to mimic us.
They could be. Yeah, maybe they're trying, but they can't quite look just like us. Maybe they're trying to blend and morph with us. Well,
and maybe that has something to do with, if it is some sort of time displacement, so maybe they're relating to us at a different point in time. We're seeing them modern day, but they might be referring back to like the 1940s with the fedora. That was their frame of reference.
The 1940s, you think of these cloak and dagger stories. You think of the shadow.
Yeah. The shadow knows.
Yeah. The shadow knows. What evil lurks in the hearts and minds of men, the shadow knows. Well, that's what they appear like. So they seem to be strangely out of place and out of time, but they're real. I have no doubt of that. In fact, there's one picture that appears in your book, Walk in the Shadows, and it's taken in the Wilkinson Mill.
Mm-hmm.
It shows a gathering of people. It was taken during a public ghost hunt, which are always well attended. Sometimes we have too many people there. It's not quite as spooky, but this is quite a gathering, and they're gathered around the wooden rail over the water wheel pit, which is a more modern addition. And there's a shadow projected on the wall. It's very black, and that's the one I'm thinking of. Yep. Yes. And very dark shadow. And at first I thought it was a young lady standing there. And then I noticed, no, her shadow is by our perspective more off to the right. And then there's this tall black shadow, looks like it's wearing a cloak and hat. That's an interpretation of it, but it is a definite shadow. Now I've gone in there from time to time. I look at that wall. It's like, no, there's no stain or spot in the wall that could do that. So I think the shadow ghost was probably inadvertently captured on film in that picture. He was fond of or I don't know if he's fond or resentful of that many people being down there. But I know I have said before in the Wilkinson Mill when I've had such a group there, I said, if you want us to leave, give us a sign. We'll clear out now. We'll leave anyway. We'll just leave faster if you give us a sign. Not really expecting anything to happen. 2 times when I've said that, a spike has flown across the room.
Well,
people who saw that, they come back.
Here's the thing, though. If you normally, when you're in that room, if you normally just see an odd shape or some type of shadow like that, but when you have a larger group there and he tries to manifest into something that appears more human-like, he tries to acclimate himself to the group, that to me doesn't represent anger and resentment and wanting you guys gone. It is more of, I gotta fit in. Yeah, I need
party.
Yes, I need to be a part of this, and maybe that's just his way of doing it.
You mean that's his camaraderie? He likes the interaction with living people.
Exactly.
He's no longer invisible and shut out.
Exactly, and he's less likely to have people run from him if he takes on the shape of something that we recognize as human. And I think that's another way to look at it.
Found him as one of us.
Yeah, when they go through the effort to make us comfortable with their presence by their figure, I think we need to accept that for what it is, and that's actually a gift. They're trying to make us feel less uncomfortable because they're not a big black blob blocking out the light.
Yeah. I don't think they try to be frightening. I think they don't have any. Well, some of them are a little malicious, like what Mike encountered as a boy.
Yeah,
definitely wanted to play with him and didn't care if it frightened him. There's a question: are there female shadow persons?
That's a great question.
Is there a great answer to it?
I really don't know, because we always refer to the shadow man. I have had people specifically, say it was a shadow man, so they had an idea that it was male in gender, or maybe it's just because of the style of, if they're wearing a hat or something, they just automatically assume, well, it's a guy. But we usually just refer to it as a shadow man. We never say shadow woman, do we?
No, they might be like the angels of neither sex. Really.
Exactly. When you say they're interdimensional beings, there's a very real possibility that is the case.
Yeah. Yeah, we probably don't understand, like you said, being interdimensional like that, what their type of entity, what their characteristics really are. We're just getting an image of that.
Well, we say shadow man about the Wilkinson ghost in that mill, which was, of course, a working mill for decades. Because in the machine shop and the water wheel pit, it would only be men working. There was a man's place to work, so we just assume a workman in there. In the factory, in a machine shop, was probably male. But it's neither now. He's shed his body, theoretically. Was that a worker who was injured or killed in the factory? They wouldn't have kept accurate records of that because it was bad for business. So that would have been covered up. Could have been somebody who's just so attached to his job he keeps coming back. But we're trying to fill in the blanks here.
Right.
We don't really know why it's there or even what it is. It's just there's something there with a personality. It evinces itself sometimes. Sometimes it's caught unintentionally. Like my friend Jeremiah Olette, he's the founder of Investigators of the Unknown. He's no longer a paranormal investigator. He's moved on to other things. But we were upstairs in this Wilkinson mill and conducting a paranormal investigation. I was hosting, being employed by old Slater Mill. And we were going to go outside and said, Jerry, one of your people still up here? He said, no, they're all outside. We looked, and there was that shadowy being. It's the first time I saw it. It was January 2013. It was standing, if they stand, it was hovering in between two antique machines on display, and it was moving rapidly, like not in a human way. It was like a movie film sped up. And so I went to get my flashlight. By that time, the thing had vanished. So I put my flashlight back down. We're turning to go away. There it was again. We were able to observe this thing for about 7, 8 seconds. That's a long time to see a ghost.
Yeah.
But that, it faded away and came back. We described the same thing. And I was out in the woods of Riverside. This was last year, Riverside, Rhode Island. And I was there for an investigation with Brian Cano. And Elise was with us and several other team members. And, we were looking for a werewolf. We were on a werewolf. A werewolf had been seen out there, supposedly, and photographed. So that's why we were there. Well, didn't find the werewolf, didn't find the dog man, but we found shadow beings rising up out of the ground next to the river, the swampy ground.
Oh, wow.
Swamp gas. These were beings. These were human-like figures. So we weren't seeing one. We were seeing 5 or 6 shadow persons there. So I've been lucky to see that many.
Yeah, that's quite a few. Back to the gender thing, though, real quick. I would say the only time that we might be able to discern something like like if it's a woman, are human spirits that appear as shadows. A couple of the stories that I do include in here from our friend Rob Guttrow, he had observed his aunt as a shadow spirit, and then there was the little girl that a bunch of us, me, Shana, Tom McNicholas, Nick Moulet, Dustin Samariel, all during an investigation last year, we saw black smoke billow up and morph into the apparition of a little girl. So there we saw the transformation, which is quite rare. That's the only time I've ever observed something like that.
That also begs the question: are there shadow children?
Yeah.
Are there communities of them? I've seen multiple shadow manifestations that what I was describing, but do they appear as families? And I know some are diminutive and some are tall or statuesque. Some of them are regular human size. The tall ones seem to be more around.
Mm-hmm.
The one in Wilkinson Mill, the Slater Mill campus, he varies in size. Sometimes he looks quite tall. Other times he's, about my height. So if he means that, I don't know. He's usually tall, but he distorts. He doesn't always look the same. And he blocks out light, and he's blocked out people in photographs, blocked out their faces or their shoulders. So they're captured on film. I just wish we could, with your book, that's the first, I think, definitive work on a shadow person. And it's a collection of case studies and some speculation. So we're learning about them. We can say more of what they aren't than what they are at this stage.
Yeah, I think so. We're, like you said, we're still learning. We're trying to break it down. I think there's, definitely something different between a human spirit that manifests as a shadow, and the actual interdimensional being that is a shadow person. I think that's the one where we have a hard time figuring, okay, is this a man? Is the woman, child? I don't think we're really getting that with those type of interdimensional beings. But we have had a couple of questions in here as well about some of the other different types of shadow manifestations, and one of those was the shadow animals. And I guess it was Victoria who asked about shadow animals. Have you seen some of those as well?
Yes, I have. That night I was with you in Edmond, Oklahoma. Strange things climbing in the trees. They look like gibbons. Mm-hmm. They looked like their arms were long, and they did have appendages. They looked like something climbing in the trees. It's like squirrel monkeys, or gibbons. They're climbing in the branches, scurrying even. Now, was that one entity that split itself into different forms when it was retreating? Or were there multiple entities there? We can't know. It was just interesting to observe. There were like 5 or 6 of them in the trees. That's what it looked like to me. And a couple of others, like Chris saw one. Chris remembered the two. Shadow animals, but they're not always cats or dogs when we see them. Sometimes they are. There are shadow, well, there are ghost cats, and they're more common than ghost dogs.
Right.
Dogs. No, there have been ghost horses that have, apparitions of horses. I mean, never heard of a ghost mouse, but how would you know, really?
You can hardly see those when they're alive.
Yeah,
I know it. If something's flitting around, you're going to figure it's a living mouse. But I've seen a type of shadow animal it's what I'm describing. That was climbing in the trees.
Yeah, I have to throw this one on the screen for Shana. That's the shadow spiders.
Oh, that's creepy.
Yeah.
Are they any easier?
Get that out of here. Get that out of here.
Oh, she doesn't like the spider.
No.
No.
I guess Vanessa doesn't either. But yeah, Shana, our chat Shananigator, hates spiders. So, so Vanessa, no spiders for you either, huh?
No.
Elise is too spooked by spiders. She saves things. She'll pick up a mouse and put it outside. She's done that with snakes. She's not an eek or chop off its head. She'll save them.
I'm only that way with spiders, and something just occurred to me. We're talking about manifestation and things like that, and what they could be. The thing that Gwen and I saw on the roof of the barn, it's the closest we feel comfortable to saying we've seen something demonic.
Wow!
And it spanned the entire roof of the barn. We stared it down. It was a struggle. It was a rough night. It had taken the form of a human spider.
Oh my!
And spanned like a 15 to 20 foot arm span over the roof of the barn.
Now, is that something that frightened you, or did it find it easier to maneuver itself around?
It was done to frighten me, because that is my biggest fear is spiders.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that until just this moment. Mike put that up, and that happened 3 years ago. Mike put that up, and it clicked. And I'm like,
okay.
Oh, that motherfucker. Yeah. Yeah. So that shows that sometimes they can manifest or change their forms to make us uncomfortable too, especially if they lean towards that whole demon thing.
Yes.
Okay. See, I learned something.
No, it's educational, really.
Yeah.
Talking about, and usually when we're talking about ghosts or demonic entities, I'm rattling off answers and my own theories. But I have to hesitate when it comes to shadow persons, because there's not a lot we know, but I know they're real.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
You didn't hear the rapper at all, did you?
Yeah, I won't.
It's not for me.
Get in my belly.
Just don't start chewing on it in the microphone. From Fran Molino, is a crawler a shadow person? And I've actually seen a crawler. I don't know if you've had any experiences with crawlers, Carl.
Well, in the branches of those trees.
Yeah, I guess those, yeah.
Call them crawlers, And I have seen one in Brayton Point Cemetery in Warwick, Rhode Island, the Alphanag area. Critters. Now, you're in a cemetery tonight. And in fact, when I was a member of the Atlantic Paranormal Society before the show Ghostbusters started, like about 2 years before they debuted for that show when I was part of it, one of our training grounds was Brayton Point Cemetery in Warwick. And well, that was a haunted cemetery, I presume still is. I would see these critters running around, and I think that's either like a strange cat or a big rat. What is that thing? It's nighttime. You're going to see maybe it's a squirrel out at night. But then I saw it again. Saw it several times, and I could actually draw it. I haven't yet, but there is a type of crawler or shadow animal it's not feline, it's not canine, whatever it is. It's probably its own category, but it has a hump to its back. It kind of looks like a possum, but more slender. It's very black, but not a shiny black. It's like, again, the absence of light, something that blocks light out. And it scurries. It doesn't make any noise when it runs by. Whether it has a tail or not, I don't remember. But it's this strange thing. And it moves too fast to be a possum. or a squirrel, something like that. It doesn't hop like a squirrel; it skitters by.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the kind of shadow animal. But it's its own thing. Who knows if we could go into the dimension or peek in there for a while? What kind of critters we see running around?
Oh, I'm sure we'd see all
Shadow
sorts of things. Yeah.
Yeah, and what their animals are like. That they even have animals is remarkable. That's how we interpret.
It would be an interesting theory because, like, shadow people are, like you said, the absence of light. So if we are considered the lit beings, so to speak, are they the shadow of us?
Mm-hmm.
Are they us with the absence of light? Just something to throw out there.
If we weren't reflecting light, if we essentially became invisible, perhaps that's how we'd appear. That they move differently, they move faster.
Mm-hmm.
It's not so much that they have this whole different motion, it is that they're doing it faster and sometimes in reverse.
They're without the confines of the physical form as we know it.
Right. Do they feel more free? I don't know. Are they happy being shadow persons? They probably have some kind of rudimentary emotions.
It's what makes me think of that is my son was talking to me about a video game where that is essentially the video game. Is you have real life living people, and then you have the other world where they go and come back from, I think is how he explained it. And that is essentially what it is.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, Vanessa. I do have a chapter in here called Shadows in the Matrix, and it gets into the idea of a simulated universe. That way we may all be in a computer simulation, and maybe not perhaps a computer as we think of it today, but maybe something biological or molecular or something like that. But having a degree in simulation programming, and we talked earlier about the Watchers. If you think of the world right now as a game space, and maybe these shadow entities are like the game masters in the game, and they're dropping in and observing what's going on within the world, and we're just not understanding what it is that we're seeing when they almost mistakenly appear to us. Because anybody who's played, like Ray, and I know you've played sometimes too, Vanessa, a massively multiplayer online game where the game masters will be in there. You can't see them; they're invisible. But every once in a while, they'll do something to trip themselves up, and you have an idea that they're there. So it's is that perhaps from the idea of a simulated universe? Is that what these shadow entities may be?
So now I'm absolutely fascinated by that concept because, to me, it is easier for me to sleep at night, to believe that there are others out there that they don't manipulate us, but that they are there to watch us, document our progress, and maybe help guide us if our progress is suitable on the proper direction, going down the proper path, and I know that sounds very bizarre to people, but whether it's angelic, whether it's interdimensional, whatever it may be, is the knowledge that they're there actually gives me comfort and doesn't frighten me. Unless it takes the form of a big old fucking spider, then I'm not happy.
They've got your number.
Yeah, but I think that that's very fascinating. Ever since that happened on Men in Black when they showed the little ping pong thing at the end.
The little the universe is somebody's marble. Yeah.
always wondered. It's not outside the realm of possibility if you open your brain.
You never know.
Well, it's certainly an unsettling postulation. We could be game pieces.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a theory called the holographic universe. I'm sure you've heard it, where we are projections on a flat plane. That it's a two-dimensional universe, and we perceive it as being three-dimensional of necessity. But we're really just projections of this plate, and that's our reality. And that's where time can get distorted if someone can either intentionally or inadvertently move back and forth upon this plate, which would explain some things. But I mean, it's quite feasible that we are projections, that we become three-dimensional in our contained reality.
It's a fascinating concept. I mean, I think outside the box a lot anyway, but ever since I saw what I saw in the bathroom at my work, I told you guys both about that, about the air literally burning.
Yeah. Oh,
Well,
I think she locked up.
Like film. Hey, at least I looked kind of cute when I locked up.
All right. She's back.
Yeah, I was in a cute pose. But ever since I saw that happen, that has made me think, what were they trying to show me? What was I allowed to see for one small moment? And will it happen again? Because that wasn't by chance. There's no way that was by chance.
And maybe shadow persons are two-dimensional. I mean, they don't really give much evidence of being three-dimensional substance. Maybe they're just these flat things, totally flat. There's no side.
It's all interesting.
Well, we'll get another question or two in here, and then we're going to have to wrap it up, guys. Tom McNicholas, could shadow people be time travelers?
I believe so. I don't. Did they do it deliberately? Maybe. Maybe they're time lords. That would explain some of their bizarre costumes. You know, that they are sometimes in cloaks, very rudimentary clothes, cloak and hat. Yeah, that's an interesting premise too. That they could. Time is not the barrier that it is to us. But what's their purpose? They would observe a lot more if they can travel through time. Are they finite beings at all? Are they eternal in a sense? If anything is indeed eternal. So yeah, maybe they are, because if they can distort motion, then ostensibly they can distort time.
Yep.
Perhaps to their advantage. We've got to ask the person these questions.
Right.
Time is a man-made concept.
Yes.
Right. It is.
So
it is. It's our way to explain our reality. That's just.
And time is very dependent on matter, velocity, depth and breadth. If everything in the universe is annihilated, as the physicists postulate will happen, the big freeze, it's called, when everything just winds down and runs out of energy, and even the particles and atoms separate because they don't have the cohesiveness to stay atoms, and everything just goes cold. If that happens, then time again ceases. There's no matter to relate to, then time ceases. There's no beginning or end. There's no past or present. So maybe that's somewhat the world they live in, or they can flux in and out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And one more here, and I did notice that Diane Hilbert was down there. Our fairy queen was in the chat room. So Diane, hope you are feeling better.
Yes.
This question is from Victoria okay, there it is. Are shadow people tied to certain areas, or can they roam around and go where they want? I think it's kind of interesting. You've noted that the one seems to be only there at Wilkinson Mill. So you think it's tied there? It can't move to the other buildings?
It hasn't moved to the other buildings. I think shadow ghosts have limitations as well as great access to other spatial concepts. Perhaps it can move back and forth in time. I'm sure time is distorted by our concept of time, linear time, for a shadow person. But they do seem attached to certain areas. Perhaps they can't leave the area. In every case I've heard of a shadow manifestation, a shadow person, they do seem rooted to that area. They want that house or that building, that parcel of land. They don't seem to wander away from it to go to other places.
I wonder if it has less to do with the house. I wonder if it has less to do with the house and more to do with the magnetic field that happens to be at that particular location.
Yes, it's comfortable, or it has a foundation in that magnetic field.
Exactly.
Or maybe quartz in great.
Keith says that there's a shadow walking around in back of Carl.
That's Elise.
Yeah, Elise is lurking around back there.
Hi, Elise. Elise, hi. Elise is right here. Oh, she doesn't want to be on camera anymore. She was on the camera at the very beginning. Now she's not.
Yeah, he says it must be Shadow Elise.
Oh, let's see Shadow Elise. Come on over. They're almost done. Come on.
I can't see. It's me.
There she is. Hello again, Elise. Yeah, we are down to the end of the show, so yeah, I do want to thank you both because Elise, you did help some here with a walk in the shadows. Carl, you helped immensely with this, and I really, really do appreciate that. Keith, also down there in the chat. So yeah, really, this was work for a number of years here, and I couldn't have done it without the help of everybody that's been involved. So Carl, thank you for coming out tonight and for helping out with the book.
It was a group effort, but you were the captain to sail this through.
Yeah, and to me, it's just really the tip of the iceberg. It's just an overview of we get into the different categories of shadow people, their different characteristics. We get into concepts about sleep paralysis, and then break it down into some of the other concepts that we were talking about with time and the universe. And we're going to continue researching this and do a deeper dive. There's much more to learn here, I believe.
Next show, we'll talk about those black-eyed children that really disturb me. Those are scary little buggers.
Those are creepy.
Yeah. But apparently real. They show up.
They do. So, well, thank you very much, Carl. Absolutely appreciate it. How can everybody find you and information about what you're up to?
Oh, I'm not hard to find. One thing is if you go to Facebook, the ubiquitous Facebook, there is a page for Duo Demonology. That's my new project with James Anito.
James Anito, right. Yeah. James actually contributed a little bit here, too.
Yes, he did. I saw his name. And we have formed Duo Demonology, spelled kind of kaflooey with an IE at the end. Mm-hmm. But we lecture about the topics related to demonology, pursuit of the knowledge of wicked spirits. And Panorama Paranormal is a team comprised of two. Our director is Elise Marco Carlson and myself. So we are Panorama Paranormal, not limited to just ghost hunting, but all kinds of anomalies we will explore. From anomalous sinkholes to missing persons that have a strange edge to it. If there's caution tape and says keep out, we'll be there.
Nice.
That sounds familiar.
Right.
That's true. Yeah. So just look us up at Facebook, Duo Demonology, Panorama Paranormal, and that there. Good. Elise has that out too. She's helping with that.
She's got it. All right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm probably the only Carl L. Johnson in the state of Rhode Island whose title is Demonologist.
Right.
Yeah. And if you find us on Facebook, then it just fans out from there, the websites and all that. Different handles. So.
All right.
Or for you, for Mike Ricksecker, you can find Carl.
That's true. True enough. So, all right. Well, thank you very much. We're going to go ahead and let you guys go, and then we'll go ahead and get to the shout-outs for the viewers. So, again, my friend, thank you very much.
My pleasure, as always.
Absolutely appreciate it. Have a great night. Bye-bye. And
Bye.
bye-bye, Elise.
Bye.